Hi, a lot of you have mentioned that you're all having troubles with the research report, especially the data section. So here's me trying to, walk you through some of that. What I have here is information for US and Canada, and I have their income levels, inflation levels, interest rates. This is on a quarterly basis. Feel free to choose a different frequency if you want. You can use monthly numbers or annual numbers. But make sure that you have at least 40 observations or more. That helps with the statistical power of the test. You know, Basically says that your relationship is meaningful. It's required for the law of large numbers. Anyways, getting back to the point. What we'll do today is I'll probably run you through some simple correlations, regressions, just plotting data and how well that can be useful in terms of analyzing or making sense of the theories that you've learned. All right, so I have as I mentioned earlier, the income levels, inflation, interest rate for US and Canada. Now, if you remember, the textbook talks about is that there is a relationship between the change in the spot rate. So here I have the spot rate, so I'll calculate the change in the percentage change in the spot rate. And the way you do it is, you take the new spot rate divided by the old spot rate and then -1. This will give you the percentage change. And then you can just drag it down. The other thing that you need is the differences, right? So we need the differences between inflation. So USA inflation minus Canada inflation. So this is inflation differential. Then we need interest rate differential, and then we need income differential. Right. So this was inflation differential. Next we need interest rate differential. So we take the interest rate in the US minus the interest rate in Canada. And finally, we'll do the income differential. So income levels in the US minus income levels in Canada, and then we can just drag the formula down. Right. So the first thing that we'll try and look at is whether there is a relation, and this is basically what we've calculated is E. Right? The textbook talks about the small e. If you look at chapter 4, 8 or 9, E is the percentage change in the spot rate, right? And this is what we are trying to, this is the main variable of interest because that's what we want to explain. What causes the spot rates to change, right? So the first thing that we'll probably try and do is, just chart how the relationship looks like, because that will give us a sense on what we can expect. So insert chart, scatter, and we can see that there is some sort of relationship, but it's a negative relationship. Hi, a lot of you have spoken about having difficulties with the report, especially the data section. So here's me, walking you through some of that. What I have here is information for US and Canada, and I have their income levels, inflation levels, interest rates. I also have the CAD USD spot rate. Always remember, whenever you're doing this analysis, you want the direct quote, not the indirect quote. So this is the direct quote for CAD USD. So what we are trying to do is, run some simple correlations, see whether there's a relationship between, inflation differences, interest differences, or income level differences, which can predict the changes in spot rates, right? So if you remember and look at chapter 4, 8 or 9, the relationship or the form of the relationship that is there is basically the percentage change in the spot rates, and whether it can be explained by the interest differentials or the inflation differentials or the income differentials, right? So what we need to do is first get the percentage change in the spot rate, and this is how you do. So you take the new spot rate divided by the old spot rate -1, right? And this is the percentage change. So the Canadian spot rate has declined between the first quarter of between the second quarter of 2000 and third quarter of 2000. right? So this is 1.5, and then you can drag the formula down, right? Next you need is inflation differentials. You need let's call it INFL. You need inflation differentials, you need interest rate differentials, and you need income differential, right? So when you're calculating this differential, it is basically the US inflation minus uh, the Canadian inflation, right? For interest rates, it's the US interest rate minus the Canadian interest rates. And then you have the US income levels minus Canadian income levels, and then you can just drag the three down. Now the first thing that you want to do is you want to just run look at graphically whether there's any relationship that exists, right? So the first thing that I like to do is just run a simple scatter plot. So I chose the two series that I was interested in, and then choose the scatter. And here you can see that there is probably some sort of positive relationship, but it's also all the way around. So we can't say conclusively. So the next step that you probably want to do is just run a correlation, and the correlation is something very straightforward to do. All you need to do is you need to type in this function in Excel, correl, select your first array, and the first array is our changes in the spot rate, right? And the second array is the inflation differential. And you do have some amount of positive correlation, but it's not as strong. And that's the thing with the so this can be thought of as some sort of test for purchasing power parity, and what we see is a very weak relationship, and that's what the textbook tells us, because uh, purchasing power parity is probably a more long-term relationship rather than a short-term one. So we probably have a better chance if we used say annual data. So maybe you can try that if you have data on an annual series, right? So this is how you run a correlation. The next thing that we should do is probably run regressions. So all we need to do is go to the data tab, and there's something called a data analysis here. Some of you might not have it on your Excel. It's an add-in that you need to add. So the way you do it is go to the file tab, go to options, go to add-ins, and then here you have manage Excel add-ins. You click on go, and here you see, for me, I've selected this. If you don't see the data analysis tab here, then you probably have to select this and go OK, and this will appear. Once it appears, what you need to do is you click on that and scroll down all the way to regression, click OK. Now regression is basically a relationship between the dependent variable, and for us the dependent variable is the percentage change in the spot rate, right? So we'll select that. So we'll select this as a y variable, right? And then we need to select our x variable. So here let's just see the relationship between changes in the spot rate and the inflation differential, right? So we select our x range, and then we want the constant to be non-zero, so we don't select that. And then let's put these here, and this will give us okay. So the input range got changed, so let's select this again. And the output range is K69. So okay, and here we have our output, and as you can see, R square is basically it tells you how good or bad a fit it is, and the closer this number is to 1, that means it's a stronger fit, and here it's far away from 1, so it's not a very strong fit. So, and this is what we said, right? Given the correlation number is extremely low, so it's not a very strong relationship. And the other thing is that you can look at this regression equation and you can make some sense out of it. The other key numbers that you should probably take note of is the t-stat numbers. If they are greater than 1.96, then you are 95% sure that these coefficients are meaningful. And given that our t-stats are not very strong, we can't say that these coefficients are good. So we can't accept them to be the true coefficients. So what we were trying to do is we were trying to establish a relationship between the percentage change in the spot rate and the inflation differential. And what we got is that we don't have a very meaningful relationship. Right? So this is how you run a simple regression. Now, if you look at chapter 9, what it basically does is it runs a multivariate regression with all the three variables put in. So while we are at it, why not try and do that? So go to the data analysis tab, select regression again. Our y range is the same. Our x range would now be not just the inflation, but all three variables. Let's select this, and now let's get the output on a new worksheet. So we select that, and then we select OK. And now again we see that the R square is not very strong, so it's not a very strong relationship. However, what we see is that some of our coefficients are coming out very close to be significant. At least they're significant at the 10% level, right? So the second variable, which was the interest differential, seems like it has some validity in being able to predict. So this is how you run a multivariate regression. So now that we have this, this is sort of our relationship. So here we have E is now equal to 0.012476 plus this number times, so this was our inflation differential, so it's not letting me get this here. Inflation differential plus so this is basically our equation, right, that we found out. So I'm just trying to write it out for you so that you understand what we are doing here. Interest differential plus so this is our equation that we've estimated. Now it's not a very good estimate because the R square is low and some of the coefficients aren't very strong, but this is the best that we could do. Now maybe if you change the frequency of it, and uh, so the way you can predict the future exchange rate or the future movement in exchange rate is basically what you'll do is you'll get in the expectations for inflation differentials, interest differentials, income differentials, and plug all that back in, and you'll have an estimate of how much should the spot rate change by in the future. And that's how you can use the regression or the model that chapter 9 talks about, and make some estimations or predictions about the overall movement of the spot rate with respect to changes in interest, inflation, and income. I hope this helps. If you still have questions, you should probably look up the net. I'm sure there are tons of videos on YouTube on running regressions or running correlations, and you should probably again read chapter 8 and 9, because everything that I did, each and every step is broken down there, and hopefully you'll turn in a good report. Thank you.